I really want to call to the stage Mr. Rangaswami, our founder of Indiaspora, and Sumir Chadha. He is one of our founding circle members, and they are going to have a conversation between two prominent philanthropists. These two gentlemen have been and continue to be instrumental in giving back to the community, and they really are incredible human beings, and I'd just love to invite them to the stage.
So Sumir, we got 5 chairs, I guess.
Oh my gosh.
We have to leave some of these.
Leave one in between.
Yeah, please.
Please,
Yeah,
thanks, Amar.
yeah. So
thank you.
Let's kind of squish in here.
Yes.
So anyway, Sumir is a dear friend. So welcome, Sumir.
Thank
coming
you,
from
Amar.
all the way from California.
Absolutely.
He's one of our founder circle members. And what I want to do is kind of walk you through the life of someone who's been very successful in his career and how this person is now looking at philanthropy, looking at giving, and hopefully this will be an inspiration, a learning experience for all of you. So Sumir, to start off, I know you run a very large private equity fund, investing in India primarily. So maybe give us a little bit of how you got here. What was your life? How did you grow up?
Yeah.
Where did you study? That would give us the basis for some questions.
Certainly, Amar. And firstly, thank you for having me here. It's a fantastic event, and I'm a big fan of Indiaspora and the work you've done, Amar. I grew up partly in India, partly in the US, and like most good Indians, was an engineer in college. And then after that, switched to the business side. And been now investing in India for the last 20 years, Amar, and that's been a lot of fun because we invest in all kinds of different businesses and have enjoyed that a lot. But also what I've noticed, which is inevitable, anyone that spends any amount of time in India, is just the amount of poverty we have in our country. And, always a sense of frustration that we can't do more. And so I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, my partners and I have sort of started our making more charitable efforts and beginning our charitable journey, Amar.
That's great. So what, as you went through your life, coming here, studying, then, starting your career, what things impacted you to when you look back now and say, you know what, these are the breaks I got in life, and that's why I'm inspired to give?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think so many things. I think growing up in Delhi in the 1980s, it was such an environment of scarcity. Yeah. So then coming to the US is just amazing. And so I think that's just one thing, just seeing the immense opportunity we all have here, how lucky we all are. I think that's one of the things that's inspired me. I find one thing I find quite incredible is that we sort of have the world's most poor people in India, and we have the wealthiest community here in the US. So it's just a sort of shocking dichotomy.
So in terms of, you said you and your partners started setting aside, a program to give. So how are you looking at it? I know you live in the US, you travel frequently to India, but your fund is set up here and so forth. So how do you look at giving in the US where, you had the opportunity to study and, create your success initially versus giving to India? How do you look at that?
Yeah. I feel for me personally, I think both are equally important in different ways because giving to our communities is really important where we live. So, the way I've done most of my giving is really backing a lot of the universities that have given me a break, to your earlier question. So sort of trying to pay that forward. And then also increasingly, but also feeling that dollars just go so much further in India. So probably, increasingly weighting it there just because I see the impact is just so incredible you can have with a small amount of money in India.
So why don't you talk to us a little bit about the work you've done here, and then we'll go to India. So I know you've set up the Chadha Center in Princeton for India Studies.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about how you thought about that and how you went about also getting a whole bunch of other people to come in with you? Because that's unusual. Usually, it's one single individual doing a gift, but you did it differently. So can you walk us through how you did that?
Certainly, Amar. Thank you. Yeah. So with the Princeton Center, when I was at Princeton, it was a wonderful place, but there wasn't very much about India there. We had a very small number of Indian students, and we really didn't have the resources to study India, and it was a big frustration of mine. And going back to university, I started meeting a lot of the younger students who were very keen to have more India courses, more India research, more India engagement. And so started to work with a couple of other fellow Indian alums from Princeton. And together we, over about 2 years, we raised the money for the center, which was a lot of work. And once we raised the money, the university set up the center about a year ago. And in fact, we just hired our first head. She just started 2-3 months ago. So it's great to see that journey come to fruition, you know. Mm-hmm.
So now let's move to India. So I know you've given to a lot of causes in India. Can you kind of walk us through the areas that are of interest to you, that you're passionate about, and talk a little bit about the organizations that you've given to, at least on the bigger commitments?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I think the panel this morning was, I thought, really good because it talked about how all the giving is so interrelated and all these problems are so interrelated. So it's actually hard not to deal with health if you want to sort of solve education. It's hard not to deal with poverty alleviation if you want to solve health. And so everything is sort of linked, or climate, like we heard in the prior panel. Right. So our approach has been kind of broad-based and really trying to find what we've done is we've been very supportive of wonderful organizations like the America India Foundation, like Akshay Patra, and A-Tree, and many other wonderful organizations. And the hard part is actually there's so much to be done. Mm-hmm. So it's actually amazing. And there's so many good organizations. And one of the things that we tend to focus on is something that really speaks to our organization so that people in our team are passionate about. And those are areas we try to get more involved with, than others.
And I have to also tell you supported the Satyarthi Foundation.
Oh,
as well.
Of course,
so,
yes.
I'm
that
on
was
the
thanks
board,
to you,
so
Umar. Yeah, there you go.
So you have to mention that.
Of course.
You've done such, and Atri is a great organization. Mm-hmm. I know Dr. Bawa is here in the audience. So you've taken kind of a holistic view on India, not just any one sector, but Akshay Patra is feeding children. AIF, I know you've made a big commitment to them as well. And Atri is in the whole environmental space. So you're looking at it very holistically. Mm-hmm. And are these, when you work with these organizations, are they typically multi-year commitments? Or how do you look at the progress they make and the money you commit?
Yeah, we've typically made multi-year commitments. And we're learning. So we're early in our charitable journey. So I'm learning a lot by spending the day here and learning through the wonderful work Indiaspora is doing. So we're early in that journey, but I think what we decided 5 years ago is let's start and let's see where it takes us. So, figuring it out as we go along. So we don't have such a clear view on sort of the longer term strategy, frankly, Amar.
So in terms of who inspired you, did you look, because one of the things that we found out in our study is people are looking for role models, people are looking for validation when they give to an organization. So who inspired you to look at these organizations, or was it just accident, or how did?
No, I think many people inspired me. I think one thing that I've been inspired by is a lot of my American friends, how giving oriented they are, particularly compared to our community, where we're not there yet in terms of the sort of American giving spirit yet. So that was a big source of inspiration, seeing a lot of my American friends being very, very generous with giving. A second source of inspiration, I think, was also seeing how a lot of the leading families in India, like especially some recently, like Premji's and others, have really stepped up in a big way to support charitable giving. And then also the creation of just wonderful institutions, which makes it easy to give because your money is going to a good place. So a combination of all of those was inspiring. And also we have a lot of young people on our team for whom giving is really a huge passion. We have one person that just joined our team in California who's been very passionate about sports. So we gave to recently a sports organization in India. So we try to channel those passions. That's also inspiring to see younger people in our team passionate about something,
And they're part of Chalo Give as well. Olympic Gold Quest is also part of Chalo Give.
It's part of Chalo Give, that's right. Yeah. I was very happy to see that.
Yeah. So you've covered, you only have 15 more to go on
There we go, MR.
They'll all be happy here. So, but I also want some questions from the audience. So if there are any questions, there's one back there. I don't want to hog the stage.
No, please.
So... Yeah, I think.
My question is for both of you. For both of you.
Can you announce your name, please?
My name is Nidhi, and I represent Round Glass Foundation, which works primarily in Punjab in India, but is also based in California here. So, the question for both of you: you said you've started your journey philanthropically. I know you're both very philanthropically inclined. How do you choose your organizations and your causes? It's easy to choose big organizations because you know about them. What about the smaller ones that don't have the capacity and the capability of reaching out to funders like you?
That's a great question, and this has come up many a time. Typically a lot of people tend to give to the larger causes because they're vetted, they have staff, they have scale. How do you find the next big thing? Like you and I invest in tech companies and others, and we're always looking for the next big thing. How do you do it? And maybe I'll add to it once you're done.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's a really good question. And I think part of it is, it is a journey and starting and learning. And today, the way we've done it at least is we've done it sort of as not a very organized activity because we spend most of our time still running our business. And so this is something we do with 5-10% of our time on the side, but most 90% of our time energy goes into running our business. So it's not been a very organized effort, I would say. So you're right. Some of the big organizations, frankly, it's sort of easier just because they have very reputed people there, they have good governance, and a lot of comfort factor. We are actually we're actually looking to hire someone to drive our philanthropic efforts and a small staff. So I think once we do that, frankly, it'll be easier to find and vet smaller organizations. Today, we just don't have the time and the capacity to do that, candidly. So it's a challenge.
So one way I've done that, Sumir, is since we invest in companies, tech companies, I look for tech entrepreneurs who are leaving industry to start nonprofits. Mm-hmm. So the one I just joined the board recently is the Nudge Foundation. So the founder, Atul, was with a leading tech company in India, InMobi.
Sure.
He then wanted to leave, and his calling was to start a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And he brought the skills from the tech industry to the nonprofit space. So I've been very pleased with the work he's done in taking, some of the qualities that you get from our industries, taking risk, failing fast, doing things like that. And that was one thing that helped me kind of make my investment was to find someone from the space we come from, which is technology, and then try to invest in that and think of him as InMobi 10 years ago, right? And so in 10 years, hopefully he'll grow a very large and successful organization. So that's how personally I've done it. Question up here? Yeah, it's coming.
This is Sumir, and I'm from Ardent Foundation. We are working in primarily two areas. One is preventive healthcare and the consumer privacy. I'm a privacy and security professional for a long time. So that's the cause we are doing. But the main cause I see globally, and everybody will probably agree, is the income disparity in India as well as even in US. It's more distributed here. So is that cause covered by you or anybody? So I don't even know how we are actually, because more disparity we have, more problems people are going to actually go against each other. And so I think that I see a basic cause, but I didn't see the enough thing. And I don't know whether we'll be able to solve that problem with the capitalism or whatever we talk about, because there are all kind of talks. But what's your general opinion on that? For tackling that problem and make sure everybody's in harmony?
Well, I think most nonprofits have been categorized in different groups, whether it's empowerment, poverty alleviation, healthcare, education, right? And so people are trying to get to this bigger goal. So what do you think of income disparity and inequality? How do you solve that? That seems like the holy grail.
I think it's a huge issue. I think it's a huge issue brought up, and it's fundamental. And like you said, not just India, but like where we live, Silicon Valley. Every 2 months, this company is going public, and you've got new multimillionaires, and then you've got someone working for minimum wage at Taco Bell, right, in Silicon Valley. And so there's massive income disparity. It's just getting worse. So it's a big issue. I think there are little things we can all do. As a professional investor, for example, when we invest in a company in India, how do we set the stock options? Do we give it to the top 5 people in the company, or do we give it to 2,000 people in the company? So there's small things we can do as capitalists to try to spread the wealth more, and we try to do those things, what we can control. But it's a huge issue, and I think it's beyond the scope of what probably I can do,
or any private
any one
citizen,
person can do.
It's got to have governments. It has to have everybody involved in taxation, policy reform. I mean, I think it's the holy grail, but I don't think there's one particular nonprofit that is trying to address that as an issue. Yeah. A question up here, please, in the front.
Hi, my name is Bhavik, and I'm the Director of Philanthropy at MS International. My question is, how important is sustainability as philanthropists, and for both of you especially, because you've been doing this for over a few decades or a few years, and how do you help foundations or nonprofits if they're not sustainable at this point? How do you do capacity building for them? So
this is about the capacity building in the nonprofit sector is a big issue, as opposed to just making a direct impact on a particular program.
It's honestly not an area I know a lot about, frankly. But one thing I will say is that that I see as a positive. I see many philanthropies attracting people that have run businesses, and many philanthropies that we're dealing with now run very professionally and well. And I think that's part of sustainability, of sort of being very thoughtful and very well managed, very well run. And a lot of good people, like MR, you were talking about your friend who did a startup, a lot of good people going into philanthropy, which I think really helps with the sustainability issue,
Yeah, and I think, so let me ask a follow-up, which is, when you give, are you dedicating it to an initiative within these groups, or is it general giving where they can allocate those monies anywhere? How do you look at that?
Yeah, we've done both, MR. We've done both, general giving as well as specific causes. And we're quite flexible on that. I think as long as sometimes what happens is some organizations have a sort of portfolio of things they do, whereas other organizations tend to be sort of very focused on one particular problem. And so particularly when an organization has more of a portfolio, then we've tended to pick one area more than another, in the giving.
But would you be comfortable if the organization asked you to give the money generally to the organization? You're okay with that? Because you may not see that impact of 10,000 children being fed versus hiring 10 people in the organization.
Yeah, right? We've done that many times, giving it generally, because I think a lot of it, we also realize that for the sustainability point that you were mentioning, you need general funds. You need to hire people that maybe it's not going directly to the end folks, but the ultimate beneficiary of the charity. But it's really important to have a good organization and something that's well run and sustainable, and that takes money. So we have done that in many cases.
Great. Any other questions? I see one back there. This is good. I don't have to ask you any questions at all. This is great.
Fantastic. My name is Ranjani Saigal, and I'm the Executive Director for Ekal Vidyalaya Foundation of USA. We focus on, we actually are the largest rural NGO with presence in 100,000 remote rural villages. When I just had a question about how, when you're talking about vetting an organization, is there particular matrices that you use, or it's more about the people that are involved in the organization? So is it that you trust somebody and that's how you're like, okay, AIF, the big person there, and they are trustworthy, and that's how you give it? Or particular impact matrices that you go for? Number one. Number two, one of the challenges that we face at Ekal is that we are very remote rural. So the idea of what the issues are in remote rural villages are not easily comprehensible as opposed to urban area problems. So just any thoughts on that, of how we might communicate that better to a prospective donor?
So two questions. One is, do you vet these organizations using some kind of criteria? And the second is, in India, how do you look at rural versus urban?
Yeah, I think definitely. In terms of criteria for an organization, I think governance is really important. And governance has many aspects to it. It's got really good people that are involved with the not-for-profit, good people that are involved with the board, transparent financials, and sort of rigorous impact assessment. I think that sort of all that good governance, I think, is really important to give confidence that the money will really have a wonderful impact that we all want it to have. And in terms of the marketing challenge, I think that's a challenge for Actually, it's interesting, not-for-profits or companies, it's the same problem. You got to market something. And so I think that is a tough challenge, and many not-for-profits struggle with that. And we have seen that because it's tough to find the right way to message something to the right person, particularly when not-for-profits on the younger side, and maybe it is not experienced with so many donors. So I do think that's just generally a very hard thing to do, and it's hard to say how you particularly would market rural versus urban. I can't really comment on that, but I would say in general it's a tough problem we see a lot of.
Was there another question? Yeah, Sanjeev, go ahead.
Sanjeev Joshipura, Indiaspora. I'm going to ask what may seem as somewhat of a controversial question in the philanthropic realm. In response to an earlier question, MR rightly mentioned that it takes more than just philanthropists or just one organization to try and make a dent in the problem of income inequality, which is one of the defining problems of our time, as the questioner mentioned. So allow me to ask you this, Sumir. I know that, and actually this could well be a question for MR as well. I know that both of you do participate in political giving. Obviously, the end goal of political giving, which is a different form of philanthropy, call it if you would, is to effect policy reform that would hopefully make for a better world, right? So my question specifically to you is, do you view your political contributions as an act of betterment, as an act of empowerment, as an act of philanthropy? And how do you sort of then go about monitoring the results and hold their feet to the fire?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, we give here. In India, the giving is a little different. But do you view that as a way to empower some of the organizations you're working with?
Definitely. Well, two things. I think folks like Deepak have been real leaders of organizations like Impact, supporting Indian Americans in politics. So I think those are wonderful organizations. I don't necessarily think it's, I would at least view it as charitable giving.
Right.
But I think it's important to support the community and have to have voices of the community heard in politics. Otherwise, we'll all be the worse for it. So I would say it's more in sort of my giving, I wouldn't call it my donations to political candidates have really been along those lines. Plus, of course, the beliefs that I have with non-Indian candidates as well, supporting good candidates. But I view it as different. I would say different than philanthropic giving, and not necessarily so tied to income inequality because, usually do it for sort of a broader set of reasons or philosophical alignment with a candidate.
Okay, well, Dr. Bawa, up here.
Just as a recipient of one of your grants or support, I wanted to say a few words. I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful what people like you and others are doing. I think it's wonderful for institutions to get flexible support. And this is what we found in our interaction with you. And I also wanted to mention to others that very often it takes, I've heard, an average of 27 interactions between a potential donor and a potential recipient for something to materialize. And I know with you, we started our discussions almost a year ago, a number of interactions, and even after a decision was made in principle to give money, it took a series of meetings. And you're very right. And I, again, like to encourage many other people like you to give that type of flexible support, which leads to sustainability. I think the question you asked. Thank you.
That's a good one, Sumir. Thank you, Dr. Bawa.
Thank you.
Again, with all the nonprofits, you're viewing these as what we would call in our industry enterprise sales cycles, right?
Enterprise sales cycles,
it's going to take 6 to 12 months, many different interactions before you close the deal. So is that how typically your things happen?
I think you're right. I think Dr. Bao is right. I think it's a very good point. It's a lot of, I think, comfort building. There's a lot of comfort building and learning and interaction and wanting to get a sense that, sense of the people involved and a sense of the way that the organization thinks. And that's tough to do in 1 or 2 interactions. And usually also multiple people in our organization meeting multiple people at some of the organizations we've been involved with has been incredibly helpful. For example, with several organizations, one thing that's really been just life transforming for me and for my colleagues has been to actually go and see the work being done on the ground. So with many organizations, that's usually been just really fantastic.
Right. Great. Well, Sumir, our session is up, but great for your leadership, your inspiration, and also sharing with this group, how do people like you look at causes and what kind of commitments you make and so forth. So Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma. This is fantastic. Thank you. Great event. Thanks a lot, Emma. Thank you.